So let's take a look at how level of processing works according to the three-stage memory model. And we're going to answer the question, why would deeper processing lead to better memory retrieval using the three-stage memory model? So here we have our level of processing model. Shallow processing shown here on the left, deep processing shown here on the right, and of course it's a continuum. And here I've just marked off the two areas that correspond to the activity that you did. Depending on whether you were in group A or group B, you counted the number of vowels in a word, or you rated how useful an item would be if you were on a deserted island. The number of items that are remembered from the list is about twice as much in group B, who's rating its utility, as it is in group A, who's just counting the number of vowels. So let's explain that using our three-stage memory model. So remember, with our three-stage memory model, the three stages are the sensory register, short-term memory, which is where working memory happens, and then our storage area for all of our knowledge, long-term memory. And we start over here on the left. All sensory information that we're able to sense enters our sensory register. So sights and sounds and smells and touch and all of that stuff comes in here into the sensory register. Remember, we have our echoes and icons, just those brief traces left by these sensory inputs in our nervous system. Now, if we focus attention on any of these items, we can then become consciously aware of it and bring it into short-term memory, where we have the processes of working memory. And remember, that includes the central executive, which controls the phonological loop, the visual spatial sketchpad, and an episodic buffer. We process things here. We may be able to encode them into long-term memory and then retrieve them later on. So according to our level of processing model, let's say that the word was yacht. If you were in group A and you're just counting the vowels, it's coming in here, you're looking at it, so yacht would probably be an icon. But you really don't even need to sound out the word to figure out the number of vowels in it. So you may not even need to read it and sound it out. So you're going to, bring it in here into working memory, and you're going to identify the A just by looking at it. So you're using only your visual spatial sketchpad, and there's no meaning attached to the word. You're not really thinking about what a yacht is and what it's used for. And so the chances of you encoding it are more limited, but even if you do, it might be just sort of this thing that you have here that is sort of isolated and not connected to anything else, because you didn't think of how it's relevant to other things. You didn't think of its meaning and how it's connected to water and oceans and harbors and so on. In contrast, if you were in group B and this was the word, you would have seen it, but you may have also actually sounded it out. So now when it's here in working memory, you do use the visual spatial sketchpad, but you also use the phonological loop. Hey, you're processing it with these two different methods. So this is the dual code idea. We can encode information in more than one way. And when we do that, it's more likely to be remembered. So now when we encode it in here, because you were rating how useful a yacht is on a deserted island, you now have thought of its meaning and you've associated it with maybe the ocean. You've maybe associated it with people, because people use yachts, we're going to be seen on yachts. You may have associated it with the island itself and being able to get off the island, and you may be able to associate it with maybe a harbor. that you could sail to. Now, when it's time to do the retrieval and recall the words, once you start thinking of other things that were on that list because you were remembering, kind of evaluating them in terms of how useful they would be if you were on a deserted island, once you start doing that, you're going to start remembering all the other ones because they are all kind of connected. And so you have these connections here in long-term memory. And that's really the important idea of the three-stage memory model, is that it lets us think of how we bring things into long-term memory, how we are able to connect them to all the other knowledge we have. We'd want knowledge to be interconnected. We want knowledge to be tied to the other things that we know, because knowledge builds on itself. And the more connected it is, the better you are able to then retrieve it, because you have all these other links to the thing that you're trying to recall. And so all you have to do is think of an island and you might remember the word yacht because of that. This level of processing theory, I think, is a really easy and useful way of thinking about, hey, how is this activity that I'm doing, this study technique that I'm using, how is it helping me remember the information later on a test, for example?